Welcome to Podcast 360. I'm so excited to kick off this podcast, powered by the Podcast Academy and DCP Entertainment. I'm your host, Amanda B. Nazareno, and I'm also a podcaster. But first and foremost, I'm the Education Director at the Podcast Academy. And this is the first episode in what will be a chain of introductions to the podcast industry founders and the stories their businesses are built on. We're going behind the scenes to get a close look at what it takes to begin and grow a successful podcast company. I'm starting off the show as today's host, and I'll be interviewing Donald Albright, co-founder of Tenderfoot TV. Next week, Donald will return, but he'll take on the role of host in my place and interview another founder as his guest. We'll continue that pattern to give you a series of conversations that provide a 360-degree view of just what it takes to create something in an industry that is somehow both old and new, always changing and still growing. These conversations are going to get down to business quickly. Each host will ask their guest 3 questions, and they will have 60 seconds to answer each one. You'll hear the timer counting down their final 15 seconds. At the end, the guest will choose a topic to revisit and dig into a little deeper. Wrapped around this discussion will be another little game. Each guest will be asked to present 2 truths and 1 lie. And the host, me, in this episode, will look to uncover the lie by the end of the conversation. Now that we have a lay of the land, let's get into the first episode. Here we go. As I mentioned earlier, today we're going to get to know Donald Albright, co-founder of Tenderfoot TV. Donald, so good to see you. Welcome to Podcast 360.
Hey, Amanda. Great to be here.
So, can you tell us a little about your company and what shows you're producing right now?
Sure. My company's called Tenderfoot TV, and we were founded in 2016. Kind of got into the podcast industry a little bit by accident or chance, I guess. We didn't plan on really having a big impact in audio. We were really trying to get into the TV space, but we ended up finding and loving this audio storytelling medium that is podcasting. And over the past 6.5 years now, we've produced hit series like Up and Vanish, To Live and Die in LA, Radio Rental, mostly limited series. We specialize in narrative storytelling. And so far to date, we have over 750 million downloads and still climbing.
That's amazing. And I have to say, as a listener to many of those shows, I can't wait for the next seasons. So before we get into our conversation, it's now time for you to give us your 2 truths and a lie.
All right. Let's see how good of a liar I am. Okay. First one. I've been featured in the television series. I've flown on a private jet before, but I've never flown first class. And I once had dinner with Drake.
Okay. So the 3 facts, one of which is a lie. The first one is that you
were featured
in television.
Series.
The second one is
I've flown on a private jet before,
okay,
but I've never flown first class.
Okay.
And the last is I once had dinner with Drake.
Okay, I think the lie is that you have never flown first class, despite having flown on a private jet. So I'm really excited to find out if I'm right or wrong on that.
Do I give you the answer now?
We'll find out at the end of this episode. So I and everybody listening along can kind of see if my lie detection skills are up to par.
Yeah, I may give a few hints away in some of these answers. Might change your mind. You might you might keep your answer. We'll see.
All right. Well, I'm super excited to dig into that. Before we do that reveal, we're going to do our best to get to know you and your company with the next 3 questions, regarding which you'll have 60 seconds each to answer. So, are you ready?
Pressure, yeah. Let's get it.
Here we go.
All right. First question. Why did you decide to focus your entrepreneurship energies into podcasting?
So I started in the music industry about over 20 years ago. And I realized after a decade or decade and a half that I was spending a lot of time crafting talent, creating, managing talent and making other people's dreams come true, right? You want to be a singer, you want to be a rapper, a producer. And I would often meet those goals and make other people's dreams come true. And then at the end of the day, after years and years of putting in work, I didn't own anything. The record labels own the masters, the publishers own the songwriting rights, and I would just had a service contract with my clients. So I was putting in all this work and oftentimes financing their careers as well, which usually would indicate ownership, and I had none of that. So I just got burnt out of, and I loved it, it was hard to burn out of something that you love, right? And I just started getting burnt out because it was more trouble than it was worth, and decided that a new direction, was needed. And I didn't intend for that to be podcasting. I intended for that to be TV or film. And my business partner, Payne, decided, hey, let's make a documentary. That got changed to a podcast because the barrier of entry was so much lower. And kind of a beautiful mistake, we got into podcasting, and here we are now.
All right. Thank you so much for that insight. Absolutely glad that you could bring your own original ideas and have ownership of them, which is so important for a creative like you and Payne and everybody else at Tenderfoot. Podcast 360 will be right back after a quick break and a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Podcast 360. My next question for you, 60 seconds, Donald. What skills or insights from your achievements in the music industry transferred best into your leadership at Tenderfoot TV?
I think everything, because in 2016, when we entered into podcasting, the music industry was light years ahead in terms of the creative side and the marketing side. So the marketing immediately paid off, like my background in street teams and mobile marketing. We went to podcast movement in 2017 with the street team, with flyers, with stickers, with t-shirts, with a wrapped video truck outside. And that was things that no one was doing in podcasting. So that really paid off. And then the aggressiveness and the way that we thought about achieving things that no one else was doing. And as a manager, I also think that I've been exposed to so much talent over 20 years and managing that talent that it's really helped me. I think I have an edge over a lot of people because I can now work with different creators in the podcast space. And trust me, after working with divas in the music industry, working with podcast creators is, much, much smoother. So, but I think just that level of management and marketing, those are the two skill sets that I think really helped me out a lot getting into this space.
Management and marketing, those should be hashtags for everything. All right, this third question, Donald, big challenge, 60 seconds again. What do you wish you'd have known when you first started Tenderfoot TV?
So I'm going to answer this question and then I'm going to take it all back at the end, and you'll find out why. I wish I had known anything because I knew nothing about this space. Like I didn't know about distribution, monetization. I had never listened to a podcast before. The first podcast I ever listened to was Up and Vanished, season 1, episode 1, the podcast that we made. So it wasn't based on what anyone else was doing. But had I known more about monetization, more about walking that creative balance and in true crime, especially because such a sensitive topic, I would have made much less mistakes along the way, saved money, not left money on the table, and just handled things in a different way. But taking it all back, I wouldn't change anything. So I wouldn't have wanted to know any of that. I think I was green enough to know, I just felt like there was nothing in my way, right? So because I was so green, I was able to learn from my mistakes. And there's no better way to teach you about how to take a win than there is by taking some losses.
Words of the wise. Absolutely. So it sounds like, well, nothing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very validating.
I wouldn't change anything. I'm very much content with, the way I learned was through making my own mistakes, and, experience is the best teacher. So don't try to get anything perfect. Just get out there and do it and learn from it.
Amen to that. Perfection is the enemy of the good. All right, Donald, it's been a fast but fantastic brief interview with you. And now we have a very brief opportunity to lightly expand on one of the 3 questions that we asked you earlier. Would you like to expand on any of those answers or dive deeper?
Let's see. Well, I'm curious what you would like me to dive deeper into.
I like that question, Donald, us
Flipping
experienced
it back on
podcast
those.
producer.
I'm getting ready for next week. I'm just flipping
Oh
it back
my
on you.
gosh. Yes, exactly. Perfect. Well, that's going to be a great interview too. I think I would really like to hear a little bit more about, you were a high-level music executive and you had a lot of avenues where you could have gone and you saw the opportunity in podcasting. So if you could revisit that a little bit more, what was that light bulb moment, where you're like, podcasting, this is it for me?
Yeah, so I started the company. My business partner, he had the idea. Payne Lindsay, host of Up and Vanish, Radio Rental, Atlanta Monster. He's a creative guy. He was doing all my music videos for the artists that I was managing. So we had built this working relationship for 6 years, and he trusted me from a business standpoint, and I trusted him from a creative standpoint. So he said, let's go on this journey together. So it wasn't that we really set out to get into podcasting. It was just we set out to do something together that would be successful, and it ended up being podcasting. So the light bulb moment for both of us, because he was doing really good music videos, Fast and Furious music videos, and T.I. and Future and a bunch of stuff, and he was burnt out because he couldn't creatively put his imprint on someone else's music video, and I couldn't creatively put my imprint on some artists' albums and certain things, or wasn't getting kind of the credit that I thought I was deserved in the ownership and of building these people's careers. So we both kind of had this light bulb moment of, you know what, this is no longer creatively fulfilling, and we're not making, we're putting in so much work and we're not setting ourselves up for real success and ownership. So it was kind of a double light bulb moment for the both of us. But I think also to answer one of the other questions a little bit more is, if you really look at the structure of Tenderfoot, it follows the structure of a record label. If Payne is a co-founder, but also an artist, but we treat our hosts like artists and our podcasts like albums. And that's kind of our mind frame and how we set up the company almost, without even thinking about it. It was already ingrained in like our thought process. So just a little more insight of like how our minds work, and that just because you're in an industry or medium, don't be confined by what other people are doing. Bring your creative spin to it and make it something new. And then hopefully that'll make you stand out and have success.
I love hearing about how your creative synthesis just allowed you both to notice this open door and walk right through it. That's amazing. And it's led to so many great podcasts. So, all right, Donald, I'm sad to have to wrap this conversation, but now that we've just about pretty much finished everything else here, it's time to revisit those 2 truths and a lie that you presented in the beginning.
Here we go.
So, based on what we've learned about Donald, I think I'm actually going to keep my original guess. I still think you met Drake, and I think the first one was true too. So, Donald, is my lie detector correct?
So I have had dinner with Drake. I have been featured in the television series Up and Vanished. You can stream it on demand on Oxygen. I have never flown on a private jet, but I have flown first class. I almost flew on a private jet one time. Nicki Minaj was paying for it, but I couldn't make it for some reason. And yeah, I regret it. But yeah.
So I was correct?
More on another episode.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, Donald, you've got my information too. So when these people come calling and you need a +1, I'm always on standby.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Donald, thank you so much for kicking things off with me and everybody else in this audience as well. Thank you for joining us. Folks, Donald will be back next week, so you'll continue to get to hear all these really interesting perspectives. But in fact, he'll be sitting in my chair, in the host chair.
Man, big shoes to fill there.
All right. Size 6.5. Before we sign off, Donald, be sure to let us know, where can we follow you and find out about what's going on at Tenderfoot TV?
Sure. Just visit our website. It's tenderfoot.tv. That's Tenderfoot.tv. And you can follow us at tenderfoot.tv on Instagram and at tenderfoottv on Twitter.
Thank you so much. I'm already following you.
Great.
Thank you so much for listening to Podcast 360, where you can experience a 360-degree view of what it takes to build a podcast production company from the ground up in just 3 questions and 60 seconds. Special thanks to the Podcast Academy and DCP Entertainment. Follow all of us on Instagram, linked in the show notes, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.